Okay, so in this lab, we are going to create what's called an elastic block store volume and attach it. And we're going to create another instance, if anything, just for practice. But Amazon has a tool called Elastic Block Store. And what that means is you have an instance and you have a root volume in which the operating system is maintained on. With that said, you can create additional volumes for certain services. For example, you could create a volume and store your database on it, or you can create a volume for file storage services. And then it's much easier to back up and maintain because when you back up an EC2 instance, for example, you don't have to back up the whole EC2. You can back up individual volumes and set policies on those backups. So it's a real efficient way of managing your data on an EC2 instance when you break things down into volumes. It's no different than you've got 1,000 files and you just throw them all into a file cabinet, right? But what if you organize things by folders? You know, your taxes and your bills and et cetera, right? And it's much easier not only to locate, but to store and create storage policies like based on folders. But in this case, we're using the new volumes that we create. Okay, so again, the root volume is where the operating system's maintained on a EC2 instance, such as Amazon Linux, and then we can create volumes for applications and files that kind of run in perpetuity. Okay, so let's just go ahead and look at it. So in this lab, right, we're going to create an EBS volume, and I wrote down some things here. And actually, the AI, all you need to do is type like what is EBS or something to that extent, and you get kind of the similar output. So, Amazon Elastic Block Store is a cloud storage services. Again, it's a storage service that allows users to store data on servers for persistent use. Okay, so again, you create storage volumes, and you could take these storage volumes and attach them to EC2 instances, and then you can use specific volumes to run databases, create file systems, or store files. So each volume could have its own unique role. And another benefit of organizing storage by volumes is you can create snapshots of just not the entire EC2, but you can create snapshots of a specific volume to back up that data, something I mentioned at the beginning. Okay, and so you have different volume types, right? And you know you have SSD, hard drive, back storage, and you have HDD for more intensive workloads. Okay, and the benefit of doing this is obviously for scalability. You can create users can scale storage capacity at low subscription based pricing. And so the cost optimization, again, when you're identifying storage by volumes and not by a single entire hard drive, then you can optimize your costs and you can eliminate wasted storage resources. Okay, so EBS is different. If you ever hear the term EC2 instance store, you're talking about temporary storage. Okay, and EBS is more permanent storage for persistent data. Okay, so our first task is going to entail creating an instance, and we did this before and assigning a name, and we'll probably give them a different name this time. And after we're done creating the instance, we will go ahead and attach. See, we'll update the security group. It doesn't start till step 30. We'll attach an EBS volume to our EC2 instance. And it's not that difficult to do. Your main challenges or decision-making points are specifying the size and selecting the same availability zone that your EC2 instance is running in, and then you can create a volume. Okay, so let's just go ahead and get started. And we'll log into the console, so you'll have to go to your Launch Academy Learner Lab, right, and hit Start Lab and wait for the AWS light, that little light to turn green, and then you can click on it, and then it opens up the console homepage. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started, and we're going to follow these instructions step by step. Okay, so what we're going to do in steps 4 through 6 is we're going to go to compute, select EC2, we're going to launch an instance, and then we're going to give it a name. Okay, and that will be steps 4 through 6. So you can go to under recently visited, you can click on EC2. And if you know, we have 2 instances running, so we're going to launch an instance. And we're going to give it a name, and we'll just call it file storage server. And you can put dashes in between them. You don't have to. File storage server. And we want to leave it as the Amazon Linux, the free tier AMI, right? And so free tier eligible. We want to leave the instance type as T2 micro because, again, that's free tier eligible. We're going to create a key pair. We can use an existing key pair. If you have it, VAC2. If you want to create a key pair, go ahead and type VAC2 if it's not coming up for you, or you could type VAC3. So we'll select an existing key pair, and we'll go to our network settings and we'll click edit. Okay. And then we're going to choose our VPC. Again, you don't want to choose the default VPC. You want to choose the lab VPC that we created way back in Lab 1. Seems like a long time ago. And then for the subnet, we want to put this server in the private subnet 1. So we'll put this in 172.16 2.0 subnet. And of course, auto assign public IP, we want to disable that because, again, it's in a private subnet. And if you recall from last lab, we had a NAT gateway in which instances and objects in the private subnet could have internet access. Okay, we're going to create a security group, and we are going to call it file storage servers. And let's go to the instructions and let's see exactly what they want us to do with the security group. So we've done a key pair. They want to auto assign a public IP. So let's just see where they. We can do that. I mean, we don't have to, but we can auto assign the public IP. We'll delete the instance soon after the lab is created. So it kind of takes us to step 12. So if the lab wants us to put us in a public subnet, right, because we would never auto assign a public IP in a private subnet, we'll just change this and we will look for, here we go, lab VPC subnet public 1 US East 1A. And of course, the network address should be 172.16 1.0. We'll enable the auto assign public IP. Okay, and we can go to step 12 and kind of look at our security group. And we've done that. And I changed the name, right, because we used the web server before. And we'll give it a description. And we're going to keep that default SSH rule because we're going to want to connect to, well, we don't need to connect to it. So, you know what? We'll just follow the instructions in the lab. So we'll remove the inbound rule and we'll copy the security group name and we'll paste it into the description. And we'll go back to our instructions. Okay, so we'll keep the default setting for storage. Okay, so when we're talking about the storage, right, we're talking about the boot volume or the root volume, right? So again, that's where the operating system's maintained, and when you start an EC2 instance, the operating system is loaded from the root volume. Okay, so 8 gigabits is plenty for the operating system. And there's a little note here, like in free tier, you can get up to 30 gigabytes of a general purpose SSD storage. Okay, go to the instructions. They want us to create a web page from it. That's fine. So we can do that. We'll copy all this. We'll expand advanced details. And under user data optional, right, in the window, we'll paste in this plain text and you can change this hello world message to creating an EBS volume lab, right? And from here, instructions should probably just want us to launch the instance. And we will do so. Okay, so what we want to do, right, in the upper left-hand corner, you see the link for the EC2, right? Now we only have two running. One's in the process of running. Here's our file storage server, and you can see the status check is initializing. So eventually what we're going to do is we're going to create an EBS volume and attach it to the EC2 instance. Okay, and you can verify the public IPv4 DNS, the public IP, the security group name in which it's under, the key group. Okay, so it's initializing. And I will pause the video until we get to two status checks. Okay, so the status checks have completed. We will just pick up where we left off in the lab. See, so in task 9, they want us to access our EC2 instance. Okay, so we're going to copy the public IPv4 address, right? And we're going to open that up in our browser. And it's going to tell us that the web page doesn't load, and that you should know by now the reason why the web page doesn't load is because there's really nothing in our security group. We're not allowing any traffic, whether it's allowed or disallowed. And if you have nothing there, there's an implicit deny. So if there's no match, right, then the default rule is just to drop everything. Okay, so keep that in mind. If you create policy to allow HTTP and HTTPS, right, and you're wondering why you can't upload or download files to an EC2 instance, for example, It's because there's an implicit deny, and you would have to add a permit rule in your security group. Okay? So we will do that. We'll do as the lab instructs, and that will be step 21. So you put a check mark on the file storage server. Okay, and under the details, copy that public IPv4, and you'll get a notice that's been copied. Open a new tab, right click, go paste, and it's just going to be spinning for a while, and eventually you'll get it. This site can't be reached, right? So again, that just shows you, it demonstrates, right, when you have to create a security group to allow traffic to go through. You can allow all traffic to go through, but then again, that would make your instance open, available to port scanning and inappropriate access. So you only want to allow the traffic to go through as far as the services that you're running on that instance. Okay, so that's not working. So what they'll want us to do is probably update the security group. Okay, so we'll make sure that check mark is still there. And we'll go to network and security. We'll go to security groups. There's more than one way to access the security group. For example, you can leave a check mark here. You can go to security, and there's your security group. You could click on it here, right? That's one way of accessing it. The lab instructions say go to the left menu, go to network and security, and click on security groups. Okay? And you notice we have a lot of security groups that we created from previous labs. So you want to click on the file storage servers, and you want to go to your inbound rules. Okay, and as you can see, we have no inbound rules, right? And so what we want to do is we want to edit the inbound rules, and we want to add a rule. And you would want to specify under custom TCP, under the type, you'd want to change that to HTTP, which is default port 80. And if it was a web server serving the internet, right, you would allow from any IPv4 address. Okay, and then from here, right, and you could put descriptions in your security rules. So, the allows web page access from any IP, right? You can add description, and then you can add a rule. And if you wanted to allow HTTPS, now I think in a previous lab, if you go to your browser window and you key in HTTPS, but you don't have a rule for it, you're not going to be able to access the web page because you're now allowing access over port 443. But we're going to allow both HTTP and HTTP access from any IPv4 address, and the description allows encrypted web page access for any IP. Right? So when you have a website and you're taking in somebody's credit card information, for example, right? And if as an end user, you want to make sure it says HTTPS because you want to make sure your session and connection between you and that web server while you're supplying credit card information and other personal data is encrypted, right? So if you look in that browser window and it says HTTP, you probably want to refrain from typing any personal information. And then you can add SSH rule. So you can type SSH, which is port 22. And if you really wanted to lock it down, you could just specify the IP that you're at now within the console. You could just type my IP, and it automatically populates the IP address that you're logged on as. And you could say allows secure shell access from my IP only. Okay, and then you would save the rules. Okay, and you would want to click on the security group rule again, right? And let's just check our outbound. So you have a tab for inbound rules, and you can see them here. And your description should be there as well. And you would want to check your outbound rules. And let's check it, and let's go to edit outbound rules. And by default, we're allowing all outbound traffic. And again, that's something you could lock down as well. For now, we'll just leave it as is. We'll just make sure, we'll just cancel. You don't need to save the rule. And now you should be able to refresh that web page. Should allow us access. Okay, we've done that. I may have to rekey in that IP address. So let's go to the EC2 dashboard in the upper left. Instances running. Okay. Make sure the check mark is on file storage service. Let's copy that. Open a new tab. Paste and hit enter. And there it is. For some reason, refresh wasn't working, right? I had to kind of start all over again and paste that IP address in there, and you can see this is what we titled our webpage as, creating an EBS volume lab. Okay, so basically that was kind of like for practice. You've done that before, created an EC2 and you updated the security group and you tested the rule. Okay, now we're on step 30 and we're going to attach an EBS volume to our EC2 instance. So step 30 says return to the EC2 Management Console, and they want us to go to under instances, choose instances. And then they want us to select the web server instance, and in the network tab below, note the availability zone in which your instance is running. Okay, we're already there, but to show you how you would do that, let's just assume you weren't there. Okay, let's just go back to the dashboard. You can click on instances in the left, click on the file storage server, and click on security. That shouldn't be there. It should be under networking. And take a note of the availability zone you're in, right? So underneath here it says US East 1A. Okay, and there's your subnet ID for it, right? And that matches the topology. It should be 172.16 1.0, right? And you can click on that and you could actually verify that subnet. Again, 172.16 1.0. Okay, and so the availability zone they want us to pay attention to is US East 1A. Simple enough, right? And they're saying the EBS volume you will soon create will need to be in that same availability zone. Got it. Okay. And so we'll go to step 33 in the left navigation pane. We'll go to Elastic Block Store and we'll select volumes. So left navigation pane, Elastic Block Store, and we select volumes. And from here, we're going to want to select create a volume. Okay, now we only need 1 gigabyte of volume. Okay, we don't need 100. And again, in AWS, you pay for what you use. One of our faculty had a great example of how Amazon Web Services work with reducing costs. And it was stated it's like using electricity in your home, right? If you really want to cut down costs, right, then you can make sure that the lights in the rooms that you're not in are all turned off. When you leave the house, you can make sure that the lights are off. If you're not watching TV, you can turn off the TV. Your air conditioning, for example, you could just raise it by a couple of degrees if you wanted to save costs and so forth. So it's the same concept with the cloud, right? You pay for what you use. Now, leaving this at 100 gigabytes, right? I could be paying for more than what I need, right? If I don't need 100 gigabytes, I'm actually paying for more. But by reducing the file storage, by selecting free tier services, you can really keep your costs down in the cloud. So we're going to leave the size as 1 gigabyte, which really isn't much. It could be a lot if you had just a bunch of text files, but if you're storing videos, for example, obviously you wouldn't be able to store much with 1 gigabyte. So just keep in mind for the purposes of the lab, we've selected 1 gigabyte. And you want to pay attention to the availability zone because you want to make sure you're in the US East 1A availability zone. It automatically selected that for us, so you didn't have to change it. Okay? Select the same availability zone that your EC2 instance is running in. We did that. And then we're just going to scroll down and create the volume. We'll refresh. And this is the volume we just created. And you could tell, right, by the size. The rest of them are 8 gigabytes. Those are the root volumes for the 3 EC2s that we created. Remember when we set up the EC2 instance and we got to the storage section and we left it at 8 gigabytes? Well, each EC2 instance has a root volume. Okay, so we have an additional EBS volume that's for 1 gigabyte. And it shows that it's available. Okay, that's great. Okay, so let's go to the instructions. Okay, so we want to select the new 1 gigabyte size volume. Then under Actions, go to Attach Volume. And then we're going to select our instance in the drop-down menu. We're going to attach this volume to an EC2 instance. So we're going to make sure you have a check mark on the 1 gigabit volume that you created. Go to Actions, go to Attach Volume, and we're going to search for our instance, which is the file storage server. Okay, that's the instance we just created. Notice it doesn't show the other instance because it's in a different availability zone, right? It only gives you the instances that are running in that availability zone. So we want to choose the file storage server, okay? And you can give it a name. So I'm just curious to see if they have a recommended name. Okay, it's optional. We can just leave that device name as is. It will give us one by default. You don't have to select the actual device. And from here, you can just go. I recommend you choose a data volume. I'll explain what these mean. Basically, you have, if you look at the device, that's the folder under the Linux file system, that /dev, in which all the root volumes are logically kept in, right? So the device is just the main parent folder in which all volumes are kept in. Then you see something like SD. SD just references the type of hard drive. And I'm not a hard drive expert, but you could see you got different types of hard drives. So let's just make sure file service. So SD is the type of hard drive, and the B would signify the second hard drive under that instance. Now you got to remember in Linux or in the cloud, everything's virtualized, right? But in theory, in the AWS data center, you're talking about physical hard drives, right? Because we see it as virtualized, but in a data center, you're dealing with actual hardware. And so the B would just represent the second hard drive. And by default, it would be the first partition. Okay. So if you saw a 2 after the B, it would represent the second partition under the second hard drive. If you saw an SD A2, then SD is the type of hard drive. A would represent the first A would represent the first hard drive, right? And then the 2 would represent the second partition. So we're just going to leave this as SDB, and we're going to attach the volume. Okay, and so you successfully attach the volume. And we want to make sure that the volume changes to in use and that the new volume is attached to the EC2 instance. So you click on this. Okay, the volume state should be in use. And the attached resources, what it's attached to, should be the file storage server. Okay, so before you sign out the lab, okay, what we want to do is delete our entire infrastructure, okay, because this is going to be the last lab for this particular course. And we've only spent about $1 of the $50, so we did a good job with that. So you can minimize the lab instruction, and what we want to do is let's start off by going to our EC2 dashboard. And let's click on instances. Select all of them. And what we want to do is select terminate instance. Okay, so on the EBS backed instance, the default action for the EBS volume to be deleted is terminated. Storage on any local drives will be lost. So that's just a warning. We're going to terminate those. And they're shutting them all down. Okay, now we want to go back to our database and we type RDS and let's go to the single database instance, select it, go to actions and select delete. They're going to probably want to type delete me. We can do that. Take a check mark off retain automated backups. Take a check mark off on create final snapshot. Okay, we got to acknowledge that. And then we select delete. And it's deleting the database. Okay. Now, what we want to do is go to our VPC. Kind of like breaking down a lab, right? So we want to start off with our gateway. We should have just gateways. Internet gateways. You click on Internet Gateway and select all of them. Go to Actions and go Delete Internet Gateway. And they want you to confirm it. I probably won't let us delete the default one. So let's just select ours. That's fine. And let's go to, okay, why won't it let us delete it? Maybe we got to delete the subnets first. This is always a challenge. See if it lets us delete the default one. Okay, nope. No problem. We'll just start. We'll figure this out. We'll click on the subnets. Let's click on all the subnets. Go to actions and we'll go delete subnets. Okay, let's just type delete. See how many of them they're going to delete. Okay, so the privates was probably got to wait for that. Let's go to route tables. Select all the route tables. Go to actions. Select delete route tables. Okay. Make sure there are no NAT gateways. Good. Make sure there's no there's a lab VPC endpoint. And we can delete the endpoints. Because remember when we created the S3, we created an endpoint for it so it could be accessed by other devices within the VPC. So the endpoints delete it, and we have no elastic IPs. Okay, let's delete our security groups. Delete. Okay, now we only should only have the default one. So there's still some showing up. Probably waiting for the database to be deleted. And it takes several minutes to delete the database. Okay, there it goes. Okay, so we have a default security group for the EA5, which was my particular VPC that we created in the lab. So you can try deleting those security groups. Okay, so let's go back to subnets. See if we can delete the subnet now. See if we can delete our VPC. Go and delete the lab VPC. Okay, there we go. That will delete everything. Let's type delete. Okay, great. So if you want to verify that, okay, your VPC, you should just have the default one that's created when you open up an AWS console to work from. Okay, that subnet will eventually be deleted. So there it goes. And I'm just going down the list, the route tables, hit refresh. Okay, that's fine. They're all deleted. That's just the default route table. Okay, the internet gateway should be gone. Okay, that's good. And we want to make sure we have no elastic IPs, no endpoints, and no NAT gateways, nothing they can charge us with, right? Um, Access control lists, you can delete those. So you associate it with 4 subnets. Okay, they don't exist, so they've been deleted. Okay, security groups. Let's hit refresh. And those are deleted. So it might have been easier just to delete the VPC, but you know, you want to release the IP addresses. That's probably the most important thing. And you do that by deleting the EC2 instances and the databases. So if you go back to services and you go back to EC2, okay, we should have no instances running, which is great. And you want to double check that your database has been shut down. We got no database instances. Okay, so you completely kind of cleaned out the lab environment. All right, which is going to allow us to use this in future courses because if you go back to the learner lab, right? I've only used $1.10 of $50. So we're in great shape there. And all you need to do is click End Lab. You can always log out, sign out of your console, and ending the lab. So you want to select yes. And that completes this lab. If you have any questions, just feel free to reach out to your instructor.